Long before the rise of cities, long before the first pyramids touched the Egyptian sky, long before the Sumerians etched their first cuneiform into clay, there was a place on a remote plateau in what is now southeastern Turkey that seems to whisper of an age far older than we ever imagined. Here, atop the rolling hills of the Anatolian landscape, stands Göbekli Tepe, a site that challenges the very foundations of our understanding of human history. The wind sweeps across its stone pillars, and in the silence one can almost hear echoes of a world long vanished, a world where the first stirrings of organized spiritual thought were taking shape. It was a world without kings, without writing, without cities, yet somehow it was already a world of profound vision, of ritual, of human imagination etched in stone. Göbekli Tepe sits at an altitude of over 1,000 meters, overlooking a landscape that, in the time of its builders, would have been rich with wild game and fertile soil, though much harsher than modern eyes might imagine. The site is vast, stretching across the plateau with concentric circles of towering limestone pillars, some reaching up to 6 meters in height. They are arranged with such precision, with such deliberate attention, that even the most casual observer feels the weight of intention, the deliberate design that could only have arisen from a community deeply invested in something greater than mere survival. Archaeologists, upon first approaching the site in the late 20th century, were stunned. What could a group of hunter-gatherers have been doing, carving monumental stone circles at a time when the wheel, the plough, and even permanent settlements were still centuries away? The answer lies not only in the pillars themselves, but in the carvings that adorn them. Snakes, foxes, boars, cranes, scorpions, abstract symbols, whose meaning has eluded even the most skilled researchers. They seem to tell a story of a society attempting to interpret the world around them, to negotiate a relationship with forces larger than themselves. Every line, every etched groove, resonates with intent. It is not merely decoration, it is communication across the millennia, a silent conversation from the past that asks modern humans to reconsider what we thought we knew about our ancestors. How could a people who had not yet domesticated plants or animals, who were still moving with the seasons, possess the organizational skill and shared vision to erect such a monumental complex? And more importantly, why did they choose to do so? The excavation of Göbekli Tepe, which began in earnest in the 1990s under the direction of German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, revealed layers of complexity previously unimaginable. Schmidt, a man with a tireless curiosity, described the site as the first temple in the world, a statement that reverberated through the fields of archaeology and history. He saw in the site a place of gathering of ritual where hunter-gatherers, contrary to long-held assumptions, were capable of coming together not just to hunt or forage, but to create a shared spiritual experience, a sacred architecture that required both ingenuity and cooperation. It was a paradigm shift. For decades, historians had assumed that complex religious structures arose only after the establishment of sedentary agriculture, after the rise of cities and political hierarchies. Göbekli Tepe shattered that timeline. Here, stone rose from the earth not as a functional building, not as a home or a fortification, but as a statement of belief, of ritual, of a human need to reach beyond the material into the metaphysical. The sheer scale of the site only adds to its mystique. The central pillars of the largest circles are T-shaped, standing like sentinels guarding something unseen. Around them are smaller pillars, arranged in tight rings, their tops sometimes carved with the images of animals or abstract forms. These circles, it seems, were built, used, and then deliberately buried, a practice that remains a mystery to this day. Why would a society invest decades of labor into constructing monumental architecture only to cover it over with earth, concealing it from view? Some scholars suggest a ritual closure, a way of marking a transition, of leaving a legacy for those yet to come. Others see it as a symbolic act, an offering to the earth itself, an acknowledgement of forces beyond human control. Whatever the reason, the act of burial preserves the site with an almost sacred protection, locking its secrets beneath layers of time until modern hands could uncover them. The construction itself is a marvel. Limestone, quarried from nearby ridges, was transported and shaped using stone tools, yet the precision and scale suggest careful planning and coordinated labor. There are no signs of metal tools, no evidence of wheeled transport, yet these pillars, some weighing tens of tons, were moved, erected, and positioned in alignment with apparent astronomical and symbolic consideration. The thought required to plan such a site, to conceive of it not as a random gathering of stones, but as a deliberate layout with meaning, implies a level of cognitive and cultural sophistication that is staggering. It suggests that the human mind, even in its pre-agricultural state, was capable of abstract thought, symbolism, and shared communal vision on a scale previously reserved for civilizations thousands of years later. As we walk in our imagination across the plateau of Göbekli Tepe, it is not difficult to picture the gatherings of its builders. Groups of people, perhaps extended families, hunters and gatherers, coming together seasonally. Fires flicker against the stones. Voices echo in the circles, perhaps in song, in prayer, in recounting the myths of the animals that surround them. The carvings on the pillars may have represented not just the world they knew, but forces they feared or revered. Predators, death, rebirth, the cycles of the sun and the moon. It was a world intimately tied to nature, to survival, yet already reaching beyond survival to meaning, to purpose, to the sacred. Each pillar, each animal, each careful curve of limestone becomes a testament to the human desire to understand existence, to inscribe thought into stone, to create permanence in a world defined by transience. Göbekli Tepe remains a profound enigma, a monument not merely of stone but of the human spirit. Its discovery forces us to reconsider timelines, to ask how societies evolved, and to acknowledge that the roots of spirituality, ritual, and collective expression extend deeper than previously imagined. In the quiet of its circles, beneath the watchful stone carvings, we are reminded that even in the earliest chapters of human history, long before kings and cities, there was wonder, there was devotion, and there was a drive to reach for something greater than ourselves. Here on this wind-swept plateau, the story of humanity's first temple begins, not as a tale of civilization as we know it, but as a whisper from a distant past, inviting us to listen, to imagine, and to marvel. The story of Göbekli Tepe is as much about the stones as it is about the people who uncovered them, those modern explorers who pieced together a puzzle buried for 11,000 years. In the late 1960s, the site was first noted by archaeologists surveying the region, but it appeared at first glance as little more than a curious mound, one of many that dotted the Anatolian plains. It was not until decades later, under the determined vision of Klaus Schmidt, that its true significance began to emerge. Schmidt approached the hill with the patience and meticulous care of a scholar, attuned to the whispers of history. As he began to dig, to carefully remove layer after layer of soil, the first hints of monumental architecture appeared. Broken limestone fragments, weathered and buried, hinted at something far older and more ambitious than anyone had anticipated. Excavating Göbekli Tepe was not a straightforward task. The site had been deliberately buried, with layers of earth and debris covering its stone circles, creating a kind of time capsule. Each excavation required careful planning, mapping, and documentation, with teams of archaeologists painstakingly brushing away centuries of sediment. The stones themselves revealed astonishing details. Many of the T-shaped pillars stood like silent sentinels, while others had toppled or fractured over time, leaving fragments that spoke to both human activity and the slow work of nature. As the team uncovered the carvings etched into the limestone, the depth of the cultural achievement became increasingly apparent. Every snake, fox, boar, and abstract symbol hinted at complex symbolism, but the challenge was interpreting what these symbols meant to the people who had created them. One of the most remarkable aspects of the excavation was the realization that Göbekli Tepe was not built in a single era, but over generations. Schmidt and his team discovered multiple layers, each circle seemingly older than the next, suggesting an ongoing process of construction, use, and eventual burial. The largest circles, now partially revealed, appear to have been the earliest, their pillars carved with extraordinary care, and aligned with a precision that suggests intentional orientation, perhaps toward celestial events or natural landmarks. Later circles were smaller, simpler, yet still monumental in ambition. The archaeologists began to see patterns emerge, not just in the architecture but in the society itself. This was a place of repeated gatherings, of ritual practice, of shared cultural memory. The builders were not anonymous. Their collective labor and vision were etched into every stone they raised. The excavation also uncovered evidence of human activity that hints at the rhythms of life at Göbekli Tepe. Stone tools, flint blades, and remnants of fire pits suggest that the site was not only a place of spiritual or ceremonial significance, but also a space where humans lived, prepared food, and perhaps exchanged stories. The juxtaposition of monumental architecture with the tools of daily survival paints a complex picture, a society that, while still primarily hunter-gatherer, was capable of extraordinary cooperation and long-term planning. The labor required to quarry and transport the massive limestone pillars, carve their intricate motifs, and arrange them in precise circles could only have been undertaken by a coordinated community, working together with shared purpose and understanding. Here in the silent echo of chisels on stone, the first signs of organized human cooperation are visible. As Schmidt and his team dug deeper, they faced questions that had no easy answers. Why had the builders gone to such lengths to construct and then bury these monumental circles? Some hypothesized that the site served as a pilgrimage destination, drawing groups together from surrounding regions, a place where spiritual ideas were shared and reinforced. Others see evidence of ritual closure. The deliberate burial of the circles might have symbolized the end of a ceremonial cycle, an offering to the earth, or a means of preserving sacred spaces for posterity. Every discovery, while illuminating, also deepened the mystery. The absence of permanent settlement remains, the lack of domestic structures, and the scarcity of human burials all suggest that Göbekli Tepe functioned in ways that challenge conventional categories of temple or village. The process of excavation was further complicated by the fragile nature of the carvings and the limestone itself. Some pillars had eroded over millennia, the surface soft and worn, threatening to lose the details that held vital clues. Archaeologists employed meticulous methods, documenting each symbol with photography, drawings, and digital scans, creating records that could be studied long after the stones were exposed. This painstaking work allowed researchers to notice subtle patterns, similar motifs repeated across circles, variations in animal representations, and signs that certain pillars had been ritually oriented or marked to correspond with specific seasonal or celestial cycles. The evidence suggested a society not only capable of monumental construction, but also attentive to symbolic continuity, passing down visual languages and shared meanings across generations. The excavations also revealed tantalizing hints about the broader region and its cultural networks. Artifacts found near Göbekli Tepe, including flint tools, carved bone, and traces of early domestication, point to a dynamic landscape where ideas, skills, and goods may have moved across significant distances. Göbekli Tepe, in this light, is not an isolated anomaly, but part of a network of early human activity, a center of innovation and social complexity that predates the cities of Mesopotamia and the pyramids of Egypt. Its construction suggests that the capacity for organized labor, symbolic expression, and religious imagination existed among pre-agricultural societies long before conventional history would have predicted. Each uncovered layer reveals not just stone, but the heartbeat of a society negotiating its place in the world, seeking to understand the forces that shaped life and death, fear and reverence, survival and transcendence. Perhaps the most profound realization from the excavation was the chronological implication. Radiocarbon dating placed the site at more than 11,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by 6 millennia and the Great Pyramids by nearly 7. This makes Göbekli Tepe not merely the first known temple, but potentially the first monumental religious site in human history. It challenges the linear story of civilization that scholars had long told, that agriculture created surplus, surplus created cities, and cities created religion. Here, at this wind-swept plateau, it seems that the desire for spiritual expression and communal gathering may have preceded and perhaps even inspired the transition to agriculture. Humans were drawn to the sacred first, and from that impulse arose the seeds of settled society. Walking through the excavated circles today one cannot help but feel a sense of awe and humility. The site is at once monumental and intimate, a place where individual labor combined with collective vision to create something that transcends time. Every carved animal, every carefully placed pillar is a voice from a distant past, calling across millennia to remind us of the human capacity for imagination, cooperation, and devotion. Excavation at Göbekli Tepe is more than an academic pursuit. It is a journey into the origins of thought, ritual, and the desire to leave a mark upon the world. Each layer unearthed, each symbol revealed, draws us closer to understanding not only the people who built it, but also the enduring question of what it means to be human, to seek meaning and to reach for something beyond ourselves. As the soil of Göbekli Tepe was meticulously brushed away, the carvings etched into the limestone began to emerge like messages frozen in time. At first glance, they appear as animals, snakes coiling in silent menace, foxes crouched as if ready to spring, wild boars charging forward, birds with wings outstretched, scorpions curling with deadly intent. But as the archaeologists studied these images, it became clear that they were more than mere representations of fauna. They were symbols, encoded with meaning, a language of the spirit as much as of the natural world. Each creature, each abstract design, seems to convey ideas about life, death, and the unseen forces that governed the daily existence of the people who carved them. In a society without writing, without codified religion, these images were the voice of the sacred, a way of communicating what words could not capture. The pillars themselves contribute to this symbolic narrative. The T-shaped monoliths, rising 6 meters or more from the ground, resemble human forms yet remain enigmatic. Many of these stones feature arms carved into their sides, as if the stone itself could embrace, protect, or hold the intangible. Around these central figures, smaller pillars form concentric circles, like the spokes of a wheel, drawing the eye inward to a central space of focus. Some scholars suggest that the T-shapes represent ancestral figures, revered leaders, or mythic beings. Others interpret them as personifications of celestial forces, standing as intermediaries between the human and the divine. The deliberate positioning and orientation of these pillars suggest that the builders were not merely decorating their sacred space, but crafting a three-dimensional narrative, a story carved in stone that could be read, walked among, and experienced communally. The animals carved into the stones hold particular significance. Snakes, for instance, recur in multiple circles, often entwined or poised in motion. In many ancient cultures, snakes symbolize cycles of life and death, renewal, or hidden knowledge. Boars and foxes, creatures of cunning and survival, may represent aspects of human character, the challenges faced in daily life, or the spirits that governed hunting and fertility. Birds, their wings spread wide, seem to bridge the earth and sky, hinting at ideas of transcendence or the soul's journey. The sheer variety and specificity of these carvings suggest that the builders of Göbekli Tepe possessed a complex cosmology, a framework for understanding the world that extended beyond immediate survival into questions of existence, morality, and the unseen forces at play in the universe. One of the most fascinating features of the carvings is their abstraction. Alongside realistic depictions of animals, archaeologists have found geometric symbols, arrangements of circles, lines, and more enigmatic shapes. These abstract motifs may encode knowledge, serve as ritual markers, or represent cosmological concepts lost to time. The interplay between figurative and abstract imagery hints at a sophisticated cognitive capacity, a society capable of symbolic thinking that anticipates much later developments in art, religion, and writing. It is as if the builders of Göbekli Tepe were experimenting with visual language, creating a bridge between observation and imagination, between the tangible and the metaphysical. Each symbol invites contemplation, urging the observer to consider connections that may no longer be fully understood, but are rooted in the human urge to seek meaning. The repetition and variation of motifs across different circles at the site further support the idea of a structured belief system. Patterns emerge, suggesting not random decoration, but deliberate design. Certain animals appear only on specific pillars, some facing inward toward the center, others outward toward the landscape. Some carvings seem to respond to one another, as if the site itself were a dialogue, each pillar speaking to its neighbors, forming a narrative across space. The builders may have intended these arrangements to mark the passage of time, the cycles of seasons, or the movements of celestial bodies. There is evidence that the site was oriented with regard to solstices and other astronomical events, hinting that these images were more than symbolic. They were part of a ritual calendar, a living interaction between humans, nature, and the cosmos. The sheer scale of the carvings amplifies their significance. Unlike portable art, these monumental depictions were meant to be encountered in person, to surround the participants in the ritual space and to create an immersive environment of meaning and contemplation. Standing amidst the towering pillars, the viewer, or the original worshipper, would have been enveloped in a landscape of symbolic communication, each stone a conduit to the sacred. The experience of walking among these carvings may have been both awe-inspiring and instructive, reinforcing communal beliefs guiding behavior and linking individuals to the larger cycles of life and death that defined their existence. The pillars were not passive, they were active participants in the spiritual life of the community. One of the enduring mysteries is the absence of human depictions. Despite the elaborate carvings of animals and symbols, no clear images of humans have been found at Göbekli Tepe, aside from the anthropomorphic T-shaped pillars themselves. This absence raises profound questions about the worldview of its builders. Perhaps the human form was considered too sacred to depict directly, or perhaps humans were understood to be inseparable from the natural and spiritual forces represented by the animals. This emphasis on the non-human world suggests a cosmology in which humans were participants in a broader, interconnected web of life, guided and constrained by the spirits and cycles embodied in the carvings. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe presents a vision of humanity not as dominant over nature, but as deeply entwined with it, subject to its rhythms and forces, yet capable of articulating meaning through symbolic expression. As the excavation revealed more layers and additional circles, it became apparent that the carvings evolved over time. Early pillars feature more intricate and varied representations, while later additions are somewhat simplified, hinting at changes in ritual practice, social organization, or cultural emphasis. The repetition of certain motifs across centuries underscores a continuity of belief, a shared understanding passed down through generations. Even without written records, the people of Göbekli Tepe managed to preserve and transmit complex ideas through stone, creating a durable legacy that continues to speak to us today. The carvings, then, are not static. They are a conversation across time, linking the original builders to modern observers, inviting us to enter their world and glimpse their understanding of life, death, and the sacred. Perhaps most striking is the sheer audacity of the symbolic imagination. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were carving stories and beliefs into stone at a time when most humans were still focused on survival, on hunting and gathering, on the immediate necessities of life. They were reaching beyond the practical, imagining a world that transcended the material, a world in which meaning, ritual, and reverence could be expressed in the permanence of stone. In doing so, they created not merely a temple but a testament to the power of human thought and creativity, a reminder that the desire to understand, to commemorate, and to connect with the divine is older than cities, older than kings, and perhaps older than civilization itself. The towering stones of Göbekli Tepe, some weighing as much as 10 to 20 tons, rise from the plateau like frozen echoes of a vanished civilization, but their very existence raises profound questions. How did a pre-agricultural society, without wheels or metal tools, quarry, shape, transport, and erect these massive pillars with such precision? The answer lies in a combination of ingenuity, communal effort, and intimate knowledge of the natural world, revealing a people whose skills and cooperation far surpass the expectations often imposed upon hunter-gatherers of that era. The process of construction itself becomes a story, a testament not only to human creativity, but to the power of shared vision, of coordinated labor aimed at something greater than survival. The limestone used for the pillars was quarried from nearby ridges, a task that required careful planning and remarkable technique. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of flint tools, hammerstones, and wedges that were used to cut and shape the stone with astonishing precision. Large blocks were carefully separated from the bedrock, their surfaces smoothed and carved while still lying in place, a labor-intensive process demanding both patience and skill. Once prepared, the stones had to be transported across uneven terrain, a challenge that would have required ropes, wooden sledges, and perhaps rudimentary rollers. The logistics of moving these monoliths, some over several hundred meters, speak to a level of cooperation and social organization previously unimagined for a society still primarily dependent on hunting and gathering. Erecting the pillars within the circular enclosures was equally complex. The builders had to dig pits to anchor the stones securely, use leverage and manpower to raise them upright, and ensure their alignment within the concentric circles. The precision with which these pillars stand suggests careful planning, as if the layout itself was part of the ritual and symbolic significance. Some researchers propose that the central T-shaped pillars were aligned with celestial events, such as the rising of particular stars or the solstices, indicating that the builders possessed not only engineering skill, but also observational knowledge of the sky. Every pillar, every placement reflects an understanding of geometry, weight distribution, and spatial organization that is nothing short of extraordinary for the time. The scale of labor required to construct Göbekli Tepe is staggering. Estimates suggest that hundreds of individuals, working in coordinated teams, would have been necessary to quarry, transport, and erect the pillars, as well as carve the intricate motifs that adorn them. This implies a high degree of social cohesion and shared purpose, with individuals contributing specialized skills to a collective endeavor. It also suggests the existence of leadership, planning, and perhaps ritual specialists who guided the construction process, ensuring that the architectural and symbolic vision was faithfully executed. In a society without permanent settlements or formal political structures, the ability to mobilize such labor indicates the power of shared belief, a communal motivation that transcended individual survival. The construction techniques also reveal remarkable problem-solving skills. The builders exploited natural features of the landscape, choosing locations with stable bedrock for their foundations and aligning enclosures to take advantage of natural slopes and contours. They likely used inclined planes, wooden scaffolds, and coordinated human effort to maneuver the massive stones, a feat requiring not just strength, but careful timing and communication. Even small details, such as the precise orientation of pillars or the depth of their embedded bases, demonstrate a nuanced understanding of engineering principles. In essence, Göbekli Tepe was as much an intellectual achievement as a physical one, a project that demanded foresight, experimentation, and an intimate knowledge of materials and mechanics. The repetitive nature of construction, with multiple circles built over generations, indicates that the knowledge and techniques were transmitted across time. Younger members of the community would have learned the methods of quarrying, carving, and raising pillars from elders, creating a continuity of skill that allowed the site to expand and evolve over centuries. This transmission of technical knowledge, combined with the symbolic and ritual imperatives that guided the design, points to a culture that valued both craftsmanship and communal purpose. Each generation contributed not only labor, but insight, refining techniques, and deepening the symbolic resonance of the site. Göbekli Tepe, in this sense, becomes a living monument to the interplay between human ingenuity and collective belief. The intricacy of the carvings further emphasizes the skill of the builders. Each motif had to be planned and executed on massive upright surfaces, often requiring scaffolding or ladders, and careful coordination to ensure symmetry and proportion. The diversity of animals and abstract symbols suggests not only artistic ability, but also cognitive sophistication, an ability to conceptualize complex imagery in 3 dimensions. The process of carving, shaping, and erecting these stones was not merely technical, it was performative, a ritual in itself. The act of creation likely reinforced social bonds, transmitted shared knowledge, and invoked the sacred blending physical labor with spiritual practice in a seamless expression of human endeavor. The construction process also raises questions about the organization of time and labor. Seasonal patterns likely influenced when work could be undertaken, with communities gathering at specific times for quarrying, carving, and erection, perhaps coordinated with the cycles of nature that governed hunting and foraging. Feasting, ceremonial activity, and labor may have been intertwined, with the construction itself functioning as a ritual act. These gatherings would have reinforced social cohesion, provided opportunities for knowledge transmission, and allowed the builders to collectively engage with the spiritual purpose of the site. Göbekli Tepe was not only an architectural achievement, it was a social and cultural focal point, a place where human coordination, technical skill, and ritual imagination converged. Even the deliberate burial of the site, which has preserved these monumental constructions for millennia, may reflect an extension of the builder's ingenuity. Covering the circles with soil could have served practical purposes, protecting the stones from erosion, but it also seems to carry symbolic weight, a ceremonial closure marking the end of a cycle. The effort involved in burying such massive structures underscores the continued communal labor and planning that characterize the site, reinforcing the idea that Göbekli Tepe was not a one-time project, but a sustained cultural endeavor shaped by multiple generations, each contributing to a vision larger than themselves. In considering the construction of Göbekli Tepe, one cannot help but marvel at the combination of vision, skill, and organization required to bring it into being. It challenges modern assumptions about pre-agricultural societies, revealing people who were not only capable of survival, but of extraordinary creativity, foresight, and collaboration. The site stands as a testament to the human capacity to conceive of, plan, and realize monumental architecture, even in the absence of tools, writing, or permanent settlements. It reminds us that the drive to create, to leave a mark, to express the sacred in tangible form, is an enduring element of humanity, transcending technology and circumstance. Every pillar raised, every symbol carved, every circle completed, tells the story of a people reaching towards something greater, a vision that continues to inspire awe more than 11 millennia later. Standing amid the circles of Göbekli Tepe, one cannot help but imagine the people who once gathered here, the rhythms of their days, the voices raised in song or chant, as they performed rituals that have left no written trace, yet resonate through the stone around them. The T-shaped pillars, adorned with intricate carvings of animals and abstract motifs, suggest a space not merely of construction, but of profound meaning. Each circle seems to have been a stage, a sacred theater where humans enacted beliefs, meditated on existence, and communed with forces they perceived as larger than themselves. The absence of domestic structures indicates that these gatherings were not quotidian but extraordinary, ceremonial occasions that drew people together across distances, binding them through shared ritual and shared awe. Archaeologists have suggested that Göbekli Tepe may have functioned as a pilgrimage site, a place where hunter-gatherers would converge seasonally, perhaps following routes dictated by geography, climate, or the movements of game. These visits may have coincided with solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events, imbuing the site with cosmic significance. In such gatherings, the construction of monuments, the carving of pillars, and the performance of ritual would have been intertwined, a continuous act of devotion, labor, and communal storytelling. Each animal depicted on the pillars may have held symbolic or spiritual meaning within these ceremonies. Predators, invoking fear or respect, prey representing sustenance, birds, linking the terrestrial world to the sky, and abstract symbols encoding cosmological knowledge or mythic narratives. Together, they formed a symbolic language that guided human interaction with the sacred. The very design of Göbekli Tepe suggests a choreography of ritual. The concentric circles with central pillars flanked by smaller stones create an environment where movement, gaze, and presence are orchestrated. Participants may have processed along the perimeters, paused at central stones, or performed dances and rites whose rhythm echoed the cycles of nature. Fire pits and remnants of burnt offerings indicate that ritual meals or sacrificial acts were part of these gatherings, reinforcing social bonds and collective memory. The site, therefore, was not static. It was dynamic, alive with human activity, sound, and intention. It was a place where imagination and physicality converged, where meaning was created through shared participation as much as through carved stone. Perhaps the most enigmatic aspect of Göbekli Tepe is its deliberate burial. Archaeologists have found that the circles were intentionally covered with earth, sometimes to a depth of several meters, effectively sealing the sacred space. The act of burying such monumental structures is puzzling. It required extraordinary effort, and yet it rendered the site invisible to subsequent generations. Some scholars propose that the burial was a ritual closure, a ceremonial act marking the end of a cycle, honoring ancestors, or dedicating the site to the earth itself. Others suggest it may have been a form of spiritual preservation, an attempt to protect the sanctity of the site from profane use. Whatever the reason, the burial transforms Göbekli Tepe into more than an architectural marvel. It becomes a deliberate temporal monument, a conscious engagement with time, mortality, and memory. The spatial arrangement of the site also implies roles and hierarchies within the ceremonies. Certain pillars, larger and more elaborately carved, may have served as focal points for ritual leaders or shamans, guiding the community through shared spiritual experiences. The positioning of participants, the orientation of the stones, and the interplay between carved imagery and physical movement suggest a sophisticated understanding of ritual space. These gatherings were not casual. They were orchestrated, imbued with meaning, and designed to reinforce shared beliefs. In the absence of written language, the architecture itself became a guide, teaching and reminding the participants of the values, myths, and cosmology of their society. The choice of animals depicted in ritual space may have extended beyond symbolic meaning into practical or social dimensions. Some scholars argue that the inclusion of dangerous predators, such as snakes and scorpions, may have served to invoke respect or fear, teaching lessons about survival, the cycles of nature, and human dependence on the world around them. Prey animals, in contrast, might have symbolized sustenance, community cooperation, and gratitude. The careful arrangement of these images, combined with the timing and scale of gatherings, suggests that ritual at Göbekli Tepe was a form of encoded knowledge, a living curriculum designed to transmit values, survival strategies, and shared cosmology across generations. Evidence from excavation also hints at feasting and communal consumption during these rituals. Large quantities of animal bones, charred remains, and tools for processing meat suggest that the gatherings were not purely symbolic, but involved practical sustenance, reinforcing social cohesion. Feasting, as anthropologists note, is both a material and symbolic act. It provides nourishment, strengthens alliances, and enacts cultural norms. At Göbekli Tepe, the blending of physical and spiritual sustenance reinforces the idea that these ceremonies were holistic experiences, intertwining belief survival and social structure, in a way that allowed hunter-gatherer communities to achieve extraordinary feats of cooperation and vision. The spiritual landscape of Göbekli Tepe was further shaped by its dramatic location. Perched on a plateau, the site offers expansive views of surrounding valleys and hills, emphasizing a connection between the earthbound rituals and the wider natural world. The landscape itself may have played a role in ceremony, with visibility of distant landmarks, water sources, or seasonal phenomena influencing ritual timing and perception. In this sense, the site was not an isolated architectural creation, but an integrated spiritual ecosystem, a place where humans, stone, and nature interacted in mutually reinforcing ways. The deliberate layering of ritual, art, and architecture at Göbekli Tepe suggests that spiritual practice was not peripheral to life, but central, a driving force behind social cohesion, technological innovation, and artistic expression. These ceremonies likely fostered cooperation necessary for monumental construction, coordinated labor, and the sharing of resources. They also created a shared narrative, a common identity that could unify disparate groups and facilitate communication across generations. In this way, ritual at Göbekli Tepe was both symbolic and functional, nurturing the social and cognitive structures necessary for early human communities to flourish. The enigmatic burials of the circles, the orchestration of animal imagery, and the monumental scale of the site collectively evoke a society in which the sacred shaped the practical. These people, long before permanent settlements, kingdoms, or written records, were capable of envisioning, constructing, and performing in spaces designed to transcend ordinary experience. The circles of Göbekli Tepe were more than meeting places. They were instruments of belief, teaching, and social cohesion, a stage upon which humans enacted their understanding of the world, their place within it, and the unseen forces that governed life, death, and the cycles of existence. In this fusion of labor, art, and ritual, Göbekli Tepe emerges not merely as a site of stone, but as a monument to the human imagination, spirituality, and the enduring quest for meaning. Göbekli Tepe exists not in isolation, but at the crossroads of one of the most transformative periods in human history. Its construction coincides with the late Epipaleolithic and early Neolithic, a time when humans were beginning to experiment with plant cultivation and animal management, yet still largely dependent on hunting, foraging, and seasonal mobility. Across the Fertile Crescent, small groups of people roamed the valleys and hills, attuned to the rhythms of nature, tracking game, gathering wild cereals, and learning to manage resources with subtle precision. It was in this context that Göbekli Tepe emerged, a monumental expression of human ambition and imagination at the very threshold of sedentism. The site stands as both a culmination of millennia of mobile life and a harbinger of the changes that would soon reshape the world. Archaeological evidence from the surrounding region suggests that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were part of a network of mobile communities, exchanging ideas, tools, and perhaps ritual practices over wide distances. Flint tools, obsidian from distant sources, and shared artistic motifs indicate that these were not isolated groups but participants in a vibrant, interconnected landscape. They were skilled in hunting and foraging, knowledgeable about seasonal cycles, and capable of remarkable feats of planning and cooperation. It is within this context that the monumental scale of Göbekli Tepe becomes intelligible. It was a focal point, a destination, a place that drew communities together, allowing for the exchange not only of material goods, but of beliefs, knowledge, and social norms. In essence, it functioned as a hub, shaping both cultural identity and technological innovation in the wider region. The timing of Göbekli Tepe's construction also overlaps with the earliest evidence of plant cultivation in the Fertile Crescent. Archaeobotanical studies reveal the gathering of wild grains such as corn and barley, along with pulses and nuts in nearby sites. These early experiments in cultivation were likely motivated by the need to support growing populations and seasonal gatherings. Göbekli Tepe, as a locus for repeated communal activity, may have influenced these developments. The necessity of feeding large groups of people who traveled to participate in ceremonies could have created incentives to begin domesticating plants, storing surplus, and developing rudimentary agricultural techniques. In this sense, the sacred and the practical were intertwined. Spiritual gatherings may have provided the impetus for innovations that led to permanent settlement, transforming human society in profound ways. The transition from nomadic life to more sedentary patterns was not uniform across the region, yet Göbekli Tepe provides evidence that the social structures necessary for early civilization were already emerging. Large-scale coordination, division of labor, and long-term planning were all required to quarry, transport, carve, and erect monumental stones, as well as to organize communal rituals. These organizational abilities, refined over centuries of building and ceremonial practice, likely laid the foundation for the administrative, social, and economic systems that would later define early agricultural societies. In other words, the site demonstrates that complex social behaviors preceded permanent settlement, challenging conventional narratives that agriculture alone drove societal complexity. Göbekli Tepe also reflects a deep engagement with the natural world, a hallmark of late hunter-gatherer societies. The surrounding environment, rolling hills, river valleys, and fertile plains, provided both sustenance and inspiration. Animals depicted on the pillars were familiar to the inhabitants, yet they were imbued with symbolic weight, reflecting an understanding of ecological relationships, seasonal behavior, and the inherent dangers of the natural world. Humans and animals were part of a shared cosmos, and ritual practice may have served as a means to negotiate that relationship, reinforcing behaviors that ensured survival while also addressing existential questions of life, death, and continuity. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe offers a window into a worldview that combines practical knowledge with spiritual reflection, demonstrating that the cognitive leap toward symbolic culture and ritual predated the establishment of cities. The site also sheds light on the early development of technology and craft specialization. Quarrying, carving, and erecting massive stones required sophisticated tools, coordinated effort, and knowledge of mechanical principles. The exchange of ideas and techniques across communities would have facilitated skill transfer, fostering regional expertise in stoneworking, flint knapping, and later pottery and weaving. These technological advancements, while initially in service of ritual and monument construction, likely had broader applications, enabling early humans to manipulate their environment more effectively, store resources, and create material culture that supported emerging social structures. Göbekli Tepe, therefore, was not only a spiritual center, but also a catalyst for technological and cultural development. Another critical aspect of its historical context is the way Göbekli Tepe challenges assumptions about the origins of religion and ritual. For decades, scholars believed that sedentary agriculture and surplus production gave rise to religious structures, that belief followed settlement, and that monumental architecture required the labor of established cities. Yet here we see monumental religious architecture emerging within a mobile, pre-agricultural society. The implications are profound. The desire for shared spiritual experience may have preceded and even motivated the shift toward farming and permanent settlement. Ritual and community, rather than material surplus alone, may have been the driving forces that allowed humans to organize in unprecedented ways, paving the path toward civilization as we understand it. Göbekli Tepe also fits into a broader narrative of early Near Eastern innovation. Around the same period, other sites in Anatolia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia show evidence of increasing social complexity, early experimentation with cultivation, and the creation of symbolic objects. Stone circles, carved figurines, and proto-temples suggest that the cognitive and cultural capacities demonstrated at Göbekli Tepe were part of a larger pattern of human ingenuity, experimentation, and adaptation. In this regional tapestry, Göbekli Tepe stands out for its scale, sophistication, and enduring presence, yet it is also emblematic of the larger story of humanity's shift from mobile subsistence to organized, symbolically rich communities. In many ways, Göbekli Tepe bridges two worlds, the hunter-gatherer past and the agricultural future. It embodies the ingenuity, cooperation, and imagination of mobile societies while foreshadowing the social, technological, and spiritual frameworks that would define settled life. The site's monumental construction, symbolic richness, and ceremonial complexity suggest that the first steps toward civilization were not linear, pragmatic, or inevitable. They were driven by human curiosity, creativity, and the desire to connect with forces beyond the immediate, tangible world. Göbekli Tepe thus serves as a reminder that the seeds of civilization were planted not only in fields and granaries, but also in the human mind, in ritual, and in the shared quest to understand existence. Despite its monumental presence, Göbekli Tepe did not evolve into a permanent city or a continuously inhabited center. Instead, it was deliberately buried, its towering circles concealed beneath layers of earth, leaving archaeologists to puzzle over the reasons behind such an extraordinary act. Why would a society invest decades, perhaps generations, into constructing colossal stone circles only to cover them deliberately, rendering their labor invisible to those who came after? Some propose that the burial was an act of ritual closure, a ceremonial gesture, marking the end of a spiritual epoch or honoring ancestors whose presence remained sacred yet intangible. Others speculate that it was a pragmatic measure, protecting sacred structures from erosion, natural disaster, or even conflict, though this practical explanation seems insufficient given the extraordinary labor required to bury the site so thoroughly. The act itself reinforces a central mystery of Göbekli Tepe, a civilization capable of enormous creativity and coordination, yet leaving no direct record of its beliefs beyond stone. The intentional burial, however, may also have been an expression of profound cultural sophistication. In many societies, acts of closure or concealment signify respect for the sacred, a recognition that certain knowledge or power is not to be profaned or trivialized. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have understood that the circles represented more than physical structures. They were vessels of meaning, places where the boundaries between the human and the divine were thin. By covering them, they may have intended to preserve the sanctity of the space, acknowledging that some aspects of their culture were meant to remain timeless and untouchable. This act, paradoxically, allowed the site to survive intact for thousands of years, preserving the carvings, the pillars, and the narrative encoded in stone for modern humans to discover. Archaeologists continue to grapple with the question of Göbekli Tepe's decline. Excavations reveal that the site was used intensively for several centuries, after which its construction ceased and it was systematically buried. The reasons for this cessation remain speculative. Climate change, shifts in regional resources, or transformations in social organization may have influenced the decision. Perhaps the emergence of early agricultural communities altered the social landscape, reducing the need for large-scale seasonal gatherings at a ritual center. Alternatively, the deliberate closure could represent an internal cultural decision, a spiritual recalibration reflecting new understandings or beliefs within the society itself. The lack of clear evidence of conflict or environmental disaster suggests that the decline was not sudden or violent, but intentional, a quiet, purposeful act that left the site frozen in time. Even as Göbekli Tepe fell into silence, its influence may have rippled outward across the region. The architectural principles, symbolic motifs, and ritual practices evident at the site suggest a cultural resonance that extended beyond its immediate vicinity. Similar symbols, carvings, and circular structures appear in contemporaneous or slightly later sites across Anatolia and the Levant, hinting at the diffusion of ideas, techniques, and beliefs. The experience of shared ritual, monumental construction, and symbolic communication likely inspired other communities, shaping social practices and perhaps seeding the cognitive frameworks that would support agriculture, settlement, and early states. Göbekli Tepe in this sense may have been a crucible of human innovation, a template for future sacred architecture and communal organization. The enduring questions about Göbekli Tepe extend beyond construction and decline to the very purpose of the site. Despite decades of research, the precise beliefs, rituals, and social structures of its builders remain elusive. The symbolism carved into the stones, the arrangement of the pillars, and the traces of ceremonial activity all suggest a deeply spiritual culture, yet without written records, we can only infer meaning. Were the animals literal representations, mythic archetypes, or spiritual intermediaries? Did the circles function as observatories, classrooms, or sanctuaries? Did the site host initiatory rituals for select members of the community, or were its gatherings inclusive, reinforcing communal identity? Each discovery raises new questions, revealing the complexity of a society that existed at a threshold of human development, sophisticated in thought, yet enigmatic in practice. The mystery is compounded by the absence of domestic structures at the site. Unlike later religious or ceremonial centers, Göbekli Tepe appears to have been used exclusively for ritual purposes. This suggests that the people who built it were able to separate sacred space from the rhythms of daily life, creating an environment dedicated entirely to spiritual and communal engagement. The focus on the ceremonial, rather than the domestic, challenges modern assumptions about the evolution of society. It suggests that ritual, belief, and symbolic expression were not merely secondary byproducts of settled life, but primary drivers of social cohesion and cultural innovation, capable of inspiring monumental construction even before permanent settlements existed. Another enduring enigma lies in the cognitive and social capacities of its builders. Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies were capable of extraordinary coordination, abstract thinking, and symbolic communication. The alignment of pillars, the intricate carvings, and the scale of labor imply leadership, planning, and knowledge transmission across generations. These were not ad hoc constructions. They were deliberate, organized, and sustained endeavors, challenging conventional timelines of human cultural evolution. Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider the origins of civilization, suggesting that the impulse to create, to symbolize, and to ritualize may have preceded agriculture, cities, and written language, fundamentally reshaping our understanding of early human society. Even in its silence, Göbekli Tepe continues to inspire discovery. Modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, 3D scanning, and advanced dating techniques reveals hidden enclosures, subtle carvings, and previously unrecognized structural patterns. Each new finding adds nuance to our understanding, suggesting that much of the site remains buried, waiting to tell its story. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe is a living mystery, a dialogue across millennia between the builders and those who seek to understand them. It challenges researchers not only to reconstruct the past, but to confront the limitations of knowledge, interpretation, and imagination when faced with evidence so ancient, so removed from written history. Finally, the legacy of Göbekli Tepe lies not only in stone but in perspective. It reminds us that human ingenuity, spirituality, and social complexity are far older and more adaptive than previously imagined. The site compels us to acknowledge that monumental architecture, symbolic thought, and ritual practice are not the sole province of cities and empires, but emerge wherever humans seek meaning, connection, and expression. Göbekli Tepe is both a testament to its creators and a mirror for modern observers, inviting reflection on the enduring human desire to reach beyond the immediate, to shape the world, and to leave a mark that transcends the limits of time.
Standing today on the windswept plateau of southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe rises as a monument to human imagination, determination, and belief. Its massive T-shaped pillars, etched with serpents, foxes, boars, and abstract symbols, still dominate the landscape. Silent yet eloquent witnesses to a world that predates written history, cities, and agriculture. More than 11,000 years after its creation, the site continues to speak, not in words, but in the universal language of human aspiration, the desire to reach beyond survival, to articulate meaning, and to commune with forces greater than oneself. It is a place where time collapses, where the present feels inseparable from the distant past, and where the story of humanity's earliest spiritual and communal endeavors comes vividly to life. Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider the origins of civilization itself. For decades, historians believed that organized religion, monumental architecture, and social complexity arose only after the development of agriculture and permanent settlements. Here, however, we find the reverse. A pre-agricultural society capable of extraordinary planning, cooperation, and symbolic expression. The construction of massive stone circles, the careful alignment of pillars, and the intricate carvings speak to a society with the cognitive and social capacity to conceive, coordinate, and realize ambitious communal projects. These were people who understood the power of shared vision, the necessity of ritual cohesion, and the enduring impact of symbol and structure. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe is not merely the first known temple. It is a testament to the profound intelligence, creativity, and spirituality that existed in the earliest chapters of human history. Yet the site is not only remarkable for what it reveals, but also for the questions it leaves unanswered. Why were these monumental circles deliberately buried? What exact rituals took place within their enclosures, and what beliefs guided the builders' actions? How did these gatherings influence the subsequent development of agriculture, settlement, and organized society in the Fertile Crescent? Each stone, each carving offers clues, yet the full narrative remains tantalizingly out of reach. This ambiguity is not a flaw. It is part of Göbekli Tepe's enduring power. It reminds us that human history is not always linear, that our understanding of the past is always provisional, and that some mysteries are preserved deliberately, inviting curiosity, imagination, and reflection across generations. The carvings, with their combination of realism and abstraction, continue to inspire awe. The animals depicted are both familiar and enigmatic, representing the natural world while simultaneously conveying spiritual, symbolic, and perhaps mythological significance. Snakes coil in silent menace. Foxes crouch in perpetual alert. Birds soar with outstretched wings, and abstract forms hint at concepts lost to time. In their repetition and variation across circles, we glimpse the continuity of belief and ritual across generations. The very act of carving these images into stone, often requiring scaffolds, coordinated labor, and careful planning, represents an extraordinary fusion of technical skill and symbolic imagination. Göbekli Tepe, in this way, exemplifies the earliest marriage of human intellect and spirituality, where cognitive capacity, social cooperation, and cultural expression converge. The broader historical context enhances our appreciation of the site's significance. Göbekli Tepe sits at the threshold between the Epipaleolithic and Neolithic, a time when humans were transitioning from mobile hunting and gathering to early cultivation of plants and domestication of animals. It demonstrates that the seeds of civilization's social coordination, ritual practice, symbolic communication, and technological innovation existed prior to permanent settlement. Ritual gatherings at the site may have influenced early agricultural practices, providing both the incentive and the organizational framework for cultivating wild cereals, managing resources, and sustaining larger populations. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe is not only a spiritual center, but a catalyst for social and technological transformation, bridging the gap between the nomadic past and the settled future. The deliberate burial of the site adds a layer of mystery and poignancy. These massive circles, the culmination of centuries of labor and belief, were intentionally concealed beneath earth, preserving them while simultaneously removing them from use. This act suggests a sophisticated understanding of time, memory, and sanctity. Perhaps the builders recognized that some spaces, some creations, transcend immediate utility and require careful stewardship, even if that stewardship involves concealment. The burial also invites reflection on the impermanence of human endeavor. Even the most monumental projects may fade from daily consciousness, yet their meaning can endure, waiting for future generations to rediscover, interpret, and marvel. Göbekli Tepe's influence, both direct and indirect, extends beyond its own time. The architectural principles, symbolic motifs, and ritual practices evident at the site resonate with later developments in the region, from stone circles and temples to religious symbolism that permeated early civilizations of Mesopotamia and Anatolia. While we cannot draw direct lines of descent, the cognitive and cultural frameworks demonstrated at Göbekli Tepe laid the foundation for the complex societies that would follow. Its legacy is not only in stone, but in the human imagination, in the capacity for symbolic thought, and in the enduring impulse to create spaces that connect the earthly and the sacred. As we contemplate the site today, standing among pillars that have witnessed millennia of wind and weather, we are reminded of the universality of human experience. The builders of Göbekli Tepe faced the same existential questions that continue to occupy humanity: the meaning of life, the cycles of death and renewal, the desire to understand forces beyond our control, and the need to create shared experiences that bind communities together. In this light, the site is not a distant relic but a mirror reflecting timeless aspects of human consciousness. Its stones speak across millennia, inviting us to recognize the continuity of curiosity, imagination, and devotion that defines our species. Göbekli Tepe remains, above all, a story of human potential. It demonstrates that even in the absence of cities, agriculture, or writing, humans were capable of monumental thought, coordinated action, and profound spiritual expression. It challenges assumptions about linear progress, showing that cultural sophistication can precede technological development, and that the need for meaning, ritual, and connection can drive societies to extraordinary achievement. In every carved animal, every carefully placed pillar, every deliberate circle, we see not only the ingenuity of its builders, but the enduring power of human vision, imagination, and cooperation. The plateau itself seems to carry the weight of this history, the wind brushing against stone as if carrying the voices of those who once gathered here. We may never fully understand the rituals, beliefs, or social structures that defined Göbekli Tepe, yet its presence is undeniable, a silent testament to the origins of human civilization. It reminds us that the roots of our culture, religion, and artistry extend far deeper than cities, palaces, or written texts. They lie in the shared desire to reach beyond survival, to articulate meaning, and to create spaces where the human spirit can connect with the world, the cosmos, and the unknown. In the end, Göbekli Tepe is more than a site. More than a collection of stones, it is an enduring symbol of humanity's first steps into abstraction, spirituality, and organized social life. It challenges, inspires, and humbles, inviting us to reconsider the story of our beginnings and to recognize the remarkable capacities of our ancestors. Standing amid its circles, we are connected across time, participants in a dialogue that began over 11,000 years ago, in a place where humans first dared to carve their vision of the sacred into the enduring earth. Göbekli Tepe is, in every sense, a doorway to the dawn of civilization, a timeless reminder of the power of imagination, cooperation, and belief.